Build Show Live 2024 conference classes are brought to you by Builders FirstSource, Huber Engineered Woods, Pella, and Sashco.
Build Show Network friends, I really appreciate you guys watching this classroom education. You know, Build Show Live, we had a ton of fun here at the inaugural event in Austin, Texas, and you get a little piece of this on the recorded version. I want to say a huge thanks to our friends at Builders FirstSource. They're the guys that made this possible. You know, everything we do on Build Show Network is free, and we really like to be able to give this knowledge to you guys for free. But it takes a lot of time and effort and people and money to make it happen. So I really want to say thank you to Builders FirstSource. If you're not currently a customer of theirs, consider checking to see if you have a location near you. They have like 500 locations around the country. They're terrific people to work with. I buy a ton of materials for them on an annual basis. Not just my ready frame or my lumber packages, but window and doors and interior millwork. And if you haven't learned about their digital tools, man, these guys are totally on board with the future of the building world. So you need to check those out. So big thanks to Builders FirstSource. And that being said, let's go check out our educational sessions. Friends, thank you for coming. We are talking about the Reisinger Build Standard today. I've got with me my colleagues. Tim is my business partner, Tim Hill. He makes half of the Reisinger Build Partnership. Chelsea Sharbuck, an architect who joined us 2 years ago?
A year ago.
Year ago, all right. It feels like many years ago. We've known each other longer than that. And Daniel Glauser, who like Tim and I ran his own company for a long time before he wanted to get with a bigger team, which has been really, it's been incredible to have Daniel. Yeah. And your title is Executive Project Manager.
That's right.
He's for all intents and purposes, he's our head of construction. No one knows what that title means, but it does sound really cool.
No, I like it.
Incredibly smart builder. Our purpose of this talk today is to really kind of give you some insight on how we've developed our minimum standards. You've heard me talk over the years or make videos about mistakes we've made or problems that we've had, including if you saw my keynote this morning, I talked about a house that I did real early on in my career that had some pretty serious problems because I didn't pay attention to correct product, correct subcontractor, a bunch of problems ensued. And so as a company, we've decided, look, we're going to have a certain minimum standard for a lot of different areas. And so we wanted to give you a little bit of insight as to how we've developed those standards. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea Sharbuck.
Cool. So I can't help myself. Actually, 1 second.
Is your clicker working?
Maybe.
Clicker.
Doing it right?
I think he's got to switch it.
You're not holding your mouth right.
Higher, lower, waving, wanding.
There we
go.
Okay, so just as an overview of this presentation, to kind of give you a roadmap for where we're headed, we're going to start with objectives for buildings. We're kind of laying the grounds for where we're getting. Enemies of buildings, our defensive strategy, and then we'll have a closing challenge.
That's better.
So I'm going to kick us off with objectives for building. And be patient with me, please. There we go. Okay.
Brian was having problems in this room too? All right.
All right. So just to kick us off, I couldn't help myself but to start with a little bit of an architectural history lesson. So over 2,000 years ago, Vitruvius, a Roman architect and engineer, wrote a book that is still referred to today, De Architectura. And he said, and a lot of people refer to this as the Vitruvian triad, there are 3 things that make a good building: firmitas, utilitas, and venustas, which roughly are sort of like firmness, utility, and beauty. And as we were talking about this presentation and thinking about all of the different components that make a good building, I think this is a really good framework for what we consider makes a really good building and something that we want to ground all of our decisions in. So on that firmitas part, that's durability, and that speaks to building lifetime and maintenance, and is achieved by things like waterproofing, flashing, structural systems, material selections, etc. You can imagine how far that goes. And then that utilitas portion, the utility or usefulness, we're kind of saying is functionality, and that's obviously changed over the years. You know, as our buildings become more airtight, as our wall assemblies and our thermal considerations become more and more complex, we have to consider fresh air and dehumidification, and this encompasses a lot of mechanical systems and other systems, MEP, to make the house comfortable. And then that last bit, venustus, which is aesthetics or beauty. We don't want to leave out the thing that in reality a lot of us are drawn to. We keep old buildings around that actually don't function very well because they're beautiful, and a home should be something that someone can take pride in and want to spend time in. And so, and then going back to Vitruvius, one of the things that he said was really important for beauty is a reference back to nature. And so in this category, it could be anything from craftsmanship and detailing to material selection, proportion, order, all of the things that encompass design. And I think this is kind of where we want to start off the presentation. Just keep these three things in mind for priorities. And with that said, I'll see if I can, it worked.
Excellent.
So we're going to move on to enemies of buildings, and I'm going to give it back to Matt.
Oh, I love talking about enemies of our buildings, right? It's the control layers, right? What are the things that cause problems in buildings over time? By the way, Chelsea made all these awesome sketches. Aren't these cool? Nice job, Chelsea. Little round of applause for Chelsea. Always awesome to have an architect on.
I could draw a house.
Draw a house. A Monopoly house. Yeah. So, I mean, you've heard me say it a million times, water's our number one enemy. As builders, we need to be experts in water management. 80% of construction defect litigation is water related in some way, shape, or form. And our attorney, who's our construction attorney, would tell you that his firm here in Austin is busier than it's ever been in his entire career. There's all kinds of lawsuits happening in this town, and probably yours as well, and 80% of them probably come back to water. It's that one that, as builders, we always say, you know, no one's going to call us about a little air leakage around their front door at 3 a.m., but they're sure going to text you and call you if their window's leaking, if their roof's leaking, whatever. So those are the enemies for our building. If you give me the next slide. Here's a few photos from those enemies over the years. And, you know, as we think about that black stuff growing right there, right, I'm assuming that's mold. It's really a water management issue. It's something to do with water, whether it's liquid water from the sky, whether, in this case, actually, it was a vapor barrier issue. See that guy who's doing that demo back there?
Plastic layer.
You see that exactly. For my Austin builder friends, how many of you built houses in the 90s in Austin, Texas, where the inspector was saying, hey, your visqueen isn't complete on this wall, right? And if you know anything about Austin, Texas, this is a hot, humid climate, which means that we should not have a vapor barrier whatsoever on the inside of our houses. And we should either have a barrier or a retarder on the outside, because even middle of November, anyone have their Apple iPhone on them today? What's the percentage humidity right now outside? It's probably what, 70%? Yeah. Everyone's looking at their watches. I could tell you the temperature and the humidity on there. What is it? 78% relative humidity in the middle of November, and if you went outside, it's probably 80 degrees. So the other cool thing about your Apple iPhone is if you keep scrolling on that weather, it'll tell you the RH, then below that it'll show you the dew point. And what's the dew point? Typically, right around where we set our thermostat, you know, maybe 68 to 72 degrees is the dew point on a day today. So go outside with a cold glass of water, and all of a sudden that condensation will form. Well, if we put a vapor barrier in the inside in Austin, Texas, and someone has a rock exterior like this house that probably was getting wet by the sprinklers at 3 a.m., and then the sun comes out and drives that moisture inside, where's the cold condensing surface? Probably the back of that visqueen, and that's exactly where that mold came from on this remodel on a house that wasn't even 20 years old on Lake Austin. Oh, there's more. I
There's
forgot we
more.
had more of those.
I've got a bunch in here.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just knowing where and what and how to use when it comes to Vaporberry. Now, I don't want to just talk to as if you're all from Austin. Many of you are. But what's kind of fun, I think you may have heard me say this, I think we have 47 states represented here at the conference and 9 countries. How about that? Isn't that cool? So as we talk about this, remember, we're talking about our standards for this climate. We only build within maybe an hour or so of where you're sitting right now, and that's it, an hour drive that is. But wherever you're from, you need to know what your climate is, and I would encourage you can go to the next slide, to make sure that you bone up on your building science. Start with our Build Science 101 series, our Build Science 201 series, because these issues that you're seeing here, these enemies of our building, they could be liquid, they could be any one of these enemies, but they're common. I could have taken these anywhere, but these are all Austin, Texas. Actually, Sean Harris, I think, maybe snapped 1 or 2 of those, and Sean's in the crowd, a local celebrity with us, Sean, today. Thank you. You know, another place that we deal with water and condensation is in ductwork and in unconditioned attic spaces. For those of you not from Texas, you'll be shocked to find that most buildings under construction within a 20-mile radius of where you are right here have ductwork and hot attics that get to be 150 degrees. And those ducts right there probably are pushing 55 or 60 degree air in. And if there's any leakage in the ducts, which we all have some, if there's any leakage in the house, it's really easy to find a condensing surface and then for that little nasty insidious stuff to grow. Gotta remember to get a better clicker for next time. If we only had 10 countries represented, we could afford a better clicker system.
There we go. So we've included one more in here that's not in the typical control layers problems. We've got bugs.
Termites.
Oh, you know where that was, Tim? That was at the, I don't want to say their name, but that was at the house that we did on the water.
Yeah.
That was a weird one. When Tim was taking all the cladding off this house to redo it, it was 20-year-old house, 25-year-old house maybe.
Yeah.
And where there was window leakage, it was basically exacerbating an ant problem that was climbing up and finding that water, which, by the way, ants and termites love wet wood. It's really nice for them to...
It's like putting milk on your cereal.
I like that. So there were some really nasty pictures that we took on the back of that house. I think you took that picture, actually, Tim, and texted it to me.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say on enemies, but I think that wraps up the enemies section.
Yeah, I think this crew out here knows the enemies.
Yep.
They see me talk about it enough.
So we're moving on to defensive strategy, and Daniel's going to kick us off with this one.
Yeah, so we've talked about these enemies, and then our strategy is how do we defend against these enemies? Well, we do that by developing a standard, right? But what is a standard? It's a level of quality, but that's sort of ambiguous, right, and basic, so there could be high levels and low levels. But here we're specifically talking about construction minimums. So at what level are we comfortable building that we can achieve all of these priorities that were spoken about and defend against those enemies? So we look at the durability, the functionality, and the aesthetics. And we want to look at the minimum not being as, and sometimes the minimum has a bad connotation to it, a minimum standard.
Like code minimum.
Like code minimum, but the minimum could be up here, like where are you setting the bar? So we want to make sure that what's comfortable with what we're doing so that we can keep our priorities and our values and achieve those things. But it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We don't have one detail for the windows that we just do because we know it works. We have to consider the context. And that means essentially that we're looking at the climate, broadly speaking, the location of the house. So you mentioned that not everybody builds like we do. So we apply our standards to this location, but more specifically when we have a project, I mean, we only build here, so the climate is relatively the same, but what is the building site Is it on a cliff? What kind of soils do we have? Those kinds of things. So we have to sort of think about the location. We also have to think about the architectural design and how that affects our standards. So if it's particularly complex, what do we look at? How are we going to overcome some of these things? And we try to, so we don't necessarily have control over the design, but we can influence in pre-construction. And we consider the designers as part of our team. So we're not battling against people, but we're working with them in order to achieve those standards. And then also, of course, budget. Budget's a big one. So not everybody has unlimited budgets. So we have to take the budget into consideration and then apply that to those control layers, prioritize for that particular project what we are going to put our focus into. So then once we sort of figured out what is our standard, we have to understand the purpose of the standard. Why do we have a standard? And there's a couple of ways that we can look at that. Essentially, really importantly, is to set expectations. So by having a standard, the clients know what to expect when they hire us, and people in the community recognize us for that standard, so they know what they're going to get. But then also our homes can be measured against something else. So that sort of sets the expectations when people are looking to build with us.
Can I make one quick comment on that?
Absolutely.
I hope I'm not throwing you off.
No.
I want to make one quick budget comment, because if you saw my keynote presentation, you heard me talk about how previous to working with these guys even, when I was kind of a lone wolf contractor, I had that client who said, hey, you got to get 3 bids for everything. And when I did that, I ended up choosing a contractor that was the wrong one for a flat roof. And we had a lot of leaks and a lot of problems. And it was really eye-opening to me. And it's so easy for us to get pushed around on budget or value engineering or whatever. And the one thing that I really want y'all to get from this is not necessarily what our standard is or use this product instead of that, but I want you to think about your projects as, okay, I want to reduce the risk for my clients, and I want to reduce the risk for this building, and ultimately I want to be selfish and reduce my risk. So what is the minimum that I'm going to need to do on a defensive strategy for all these problems, water being the number one? How am I going to make sure that no matter if we VE this budget and bring it down $10 or $1 million, then I'm still building a really good house that's going to have a really good defensive strategy.
Yeah. So going back to the purpose of the having a standard, the other thing is to protect our clients and to protect ourselves. So we saw those enemies, and you've spoken about this morning some of those issues. So if we are able to have that standard and achieve that standard, then we're avoiding failures, we're avoiding callbacks and defect claims, but also a loss of reputation,
that's
right?
For sure.
And so we sort of maintain that level and can save ourselves and save our clients from issues. And then, of course, lastly, but also very importantly, we want to build quality homes. And we build quality homes by maintaining our standard.
That's right.
So then it comes to the questions, well, if you've sort of developed this standard and you understand why you need the standard, how do you achieve the standard? And so that comes to the next slide, I believe, but I don't know that it matters too much. So the way we do that is by developing and implementing a process. And for us, that process, we place a tremendous amount of importance on communication, because that really is the most key thing for us. But sort of going through the steps in our process, it begins at engaging with a potential client. And one thing that we need to make certain that we do, and if anybody was in Jake's talk last hour, he spoke a little bit to this, but really making sure that those clients have aligned values with what you have. Because if you start off with those misaligned values and they have certain expectations that are different from yours, it's going to be difficult to have a successful project. But if you can align those values early on, select your clients, and have your clients select you with that in mind, then you have a much higher chance of success. Did you want to say anything to that, Tim?
Yeah, why not? Two things. One, I think it's important to carry that thought a little further. We insist on regular communication with our clients, and at least once a week we have in-person meetings, Zoom meetings, whatever is required, all during the design phase, all during the construction phase. And the concept is, in the pre-construction phase, it's the architect and design team's job to explain to the client what the house is going to look like and what it's going to feel like walking through it and how it's going to live. But nobody is there that really is going to help them understand how it's going to perform. And that's our job. So if we can communicate often and early with the client and explain to them those features, those parts of the house that will make it endure and last longer, perform well, it will help them begin to see value in those components that we insist on that will make the house last a long time. The second thing I want to point out is many of you are remodeling contractors. Well, we are also remodeling contractors. At least half the work we do is remodeling. And I think Matt and I have a philosophy that you really can't be a very good home builder unless you are also a good remodeler, because that's where we learn everything. Mm-hmm. That's where we see other people's mistakes, that's where we see our own mistakes. How you approach your standard and meeting your objectives for a performance strategy in remodeling is sometimes a very different question than the way you approach it in new homes. And so from that perspective, the answer to how do I solve this problem is to be thoughtful. You have to imagine yourself as the water. What would the water do in this situation? Where does it want to go? How do I keep it out? I would like to think that many of our houses, when we're finished with them, we could turn them upside down, drop them in a lake, and they would float.
Don't do that, though, FYI.
That's not necessarily always the best solution, but think that way. Think about making sure the house and all of its organic components are protected. So that's just a high-level approach to how to approach setting your standard or meeting your objectives.
I want to say one quick comment on that, Tim, because Tim is so good at connecting with clients early in meetings. And honestly, Tim and Chelsea and Daniel do most of our pre-construction. I occasionally come and kiss a baby or shake a hand, but mostly it's these guys running running our business. I spend most of my time on the videos and teaching. But Tim, over the years, has really been very thoughtful about making sure the clients trust us, trust him, make sure that we're aligned early on here's what I think it's going to roughly cost. You know, one of the things we do real early on in the meeting before there's any exchange of money or any contracts on pre-construction signed is we give them an estimate on a ballpark. You know, we say this house is going to cost between X and Y, and I want to make sure we're aligned on that. And then when we give them budgets, you know, Tim and Daniel specifically, Daniel really does most of our head estimating, is making sure that we have the correct budget amount in the phases that are necessary. And we're going to get into this in a minute, but I'm probably getting ahead of myself. But we're making sure that as we get to VE, that the VE is talking about finishes and not about structure and not about these enemies. And that's something that is easier said than done, right? So thanks for letting me pop in on that. Sure. But I think you're especially good at gaining clients' trust and making sure that we're on the same side of the table. And that's part of our process too, is that we're cost plus. And so we're very specific about saying, look, we're going to really care for you and your money and your interests. Let's make sure that we're the right fit together.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I think that might wrap up the part one of our defensive strategy, and we could kind of start moving toward our next part, which we're kind of setting up as a game.
I'm going to play the role of Daniel Glauser in this game, by the way.
Is he not coming back?
He's not feeling great.
Oh, I could play his game. Oh, he is.
He is feeling
He's back.
better. Okay. If not, Chelsea.
I can fill in for him if
he just had to
fine.
hydrate.
So
You needed a coffee.
Just to get back to all those initial things that we talked about, we want to see this played out in 3 different contexts. And so each person up here has been assigned a project, and we're going to run through a set of questions together and see how they answer. Did you see the markers down there?
We got them.
See how they answer. And I would encourage everyone, I think most people have a project probably that they're working on, whether it's designing it or you're GCing it or you're working on a portion of it. Maybe keep that in mind and play along with us. How would you answer these questions? So we'll start with Tim and the gallery house. Do you want to give us an overview of your project?
I do. This is a project we did a few years ago. A very modern home on Lake Austin, if you're familiar with that. Very high humidity, high wind, high exposure environment. This particular one's on a cliff that has exceptional exposure. It had minimal overhangs and a very high window-to-wall ratio. So you imagine lots and lots of glass, lots and lots of steel, lots and lots of stucco, with flat roof. This particular house had more roof penetrations than any home we've ever done, for a lot of reasons, because the architect and design team wanted no exterior wall penetrations for venting or exhausting, so very challenging.
And then Matt, I think some of you guys have seen this one.
If you may have seen this one, this is the Reisinger build. We're doing this big series on with our friends at Builders FirstSource. Steve Basics, the architect, Chelsea got a chance, and really Tim and Daniel and I too, to work with Steve and refine some of the details. And we were in effect the clients on the job as well as the builders. This is a speculative house, but we were real specific on saying, look, we want to build a house that's lower risk. Not just today, but 30, 40 years from now. So you'll notice this house has 2-foot overhangs everywhere. There's no flat roofs. Everything's 512 pitch, 512 pitch everywhere. A couple of existing conditions though that we had to deal with. We had a lot of protected trees. And we also reused the existing foundation, 1970s foundation. It's in my neighborhood that's really solid rock after 6 inches of topsoil. So we knew the foundation was good going in. If you look around my neighborhood, you see that there's lots of brick fronts on houses, not a single crack. That telltale crack you see going from the corner of the window at a 45-degree angle? None of that. I mean, these houses have been solid. They're also rebar foundations. So that's the quick basics on the Reisinger build.
Okay. And then Daniel.
Yeah, so this is my personal house. It's a 1970s house. And what we're basically trying to do is add on. We needed an extra bathroom, an extra bedroom, but really update not only the sort of skin of the house, because there was no sheathing in this house. It's very leaky. And then the inside was untouched. So we wanted to renovate the inside, renovate the outside, and try to achieve a passive house certification. All while living in the home, which
that wasn't hard enough.
It's not something that we allow our clients to do, but
yeah, we'll do it for ourselves.
If you'll notice there at the bottom, the budget has a question mark with it.
TBD.
So part of it, that was a consideration, was how much was it going to cost to move out, and not ever really having done something like this before. It's still under construction, by the way, so I don't know what the final budget is on it yet. But yeah, so we wanted to modernize the home and make it more efficient and comfortable.
I forgot to mention, my budget on my project was like $2 signs. And Chelsea kind of had us do the restaurant dollar sign figure, like steakhouse, Chili's.
I think we have $1 sign on yours, Matt.
We had $1 sign.
So be careful.
McDonald's maybe, or a nice McDonald's.
Could get out of hand.
A fancy burger.
Nice
Top Dotties, which makes a good burger. So Tim's project was really steakhouse. I was really trying to go for a Chili's cheeseburger. And Daniel is somewhere between a Chili's cheeseburger and could we actually just do McDonald's instead?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get started. If I can get this to click. Okay, decision number 1. What is your structural solution?
Think about this in your minds for your projects going too.
We've tried to keep a lot of these pretty vague because these projects are so different, and a lot of them have, existing conditions versus new. But we're wanting each of them to speak to something unique about their project. And I think this helps define the context a bit more too. I think we should have had the Jeopardy music during
Yes.
this. Sorry. Keep it short. I might time you guys at some point. All right, I'm going to count to 10, and then you got to show your answers. They've got to read these too, so I'm thinking like 3 words, not paragraphs.
I thought we were sketching.
We did not rehearse this at all, so.
I went too long on mine, but that's okay.
Keep going. Well, it's okay. You'll get a chance to describe.
I'm not a
Tim,
good
you got to go
speaker, though.
first. Okay.
I'm
All right.
embarrassed by
Let's see your answers.
All at the same time?
Yeah. You can read that, right? Okay. Tim,
read
you
the back, they won't.
want to start us?
Yeah, this particular project actually had good rocky soil underneath it, so we weren't really worried about settling, but we did add additional foundation tied in to the existing, and of course it's heavily reinforced. The superstructure is a combination of engineered wood and steel.
Great. Matt, you want to jump in?
Yes, I just
Still
remembered one.
revising over there?
He's changing his
No, it's too
I'm
late.
adding one.
It's too late.
It's too late. I got the last word in. So we also capped our foundation on this one and then added an addition, which was certainly less costly than doing a brand new foundation everywhere. Also, we did all wood framing in the job. We were real specific about no steel on this job. I wanted to make this as buildable as possible. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but we did a truss roof instead of a hand-cut roof. We typically do hand-cut roofs on our jobs. And then we did a ready frame package. And I would say we did kind of a medium window and door package. A little shout out to my friends at Pella. We've certainly used a lot of passive house windows and doors. This was not a passive house certified package. In fact, mostly double glazed. But Daniel came with Jake and did a blower door pre-mechanicals. And what was our score? I don't remember.
It's like 0.3.
I think it was 0.34 or something.
0.3, 0.4 ACH 50.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy Pella package. I looked back later though, and we did do a good job of specifying or looking for products in their catalog that would have a higher DP rating, or PG rating is the new term. I think everything was PG 45 rated or higher. So a big shout out to Pella that really nothing special in terms of dollar figure on the package, and we got really high performance out of them. I was really pleased with that.
Yeah. Daniel?
Yeah, and so for me, obviously existing home, so there was a foundation there. Where I'm located, we have really unstable clay soils. And so the foundation that was built in 77 was solid. There hadn't really shown any signs of movement. And so what we did was we
Sorry.
That's all right.
I forgot to flip.
we
Go
matched the drilled concrete pier solution. So where we did an addition, we drilled deep concrete piers, and then the rest of the house basically sits above grade with a crawl space. And I think I'll talk some more about that, but it was really the biggest part about it was we were having to, so when I bought the house, I'll back up a little. When I bought the house, I was fortunate enough to get the original geotech
I forgot about that. That's awesome.
from the original builder. But while it was super informative, I didn't know for sure if that's how the piers that were built there were built that way. So, going back to sort of what the principles were is I wanted to make sure that this was going to last and be durable. So I did hire a geotech. We did drill. I got a new engineer who understood those unstable clay soils. The piers that they recommended were not exactly the same as the ones that were existing, but quite similar to it. And so we went ahead and drilled the piers, but in addition to that, some of those piers most of them go down about 20 feet, but we had to drill some of them underneath the existing house. And so you can see here, as far as assembling a competent team, I employed a contractor who specializes in doing just that, is drilling deep piers underneath buildings to make sure that it was going to be successful.
And we would tell you who he is, but then we'd have to kill you.
Yeah, so that was my structural solution, was basically to do the deep drill piers.
Awesome. All right, next question.
I didn't see that coming, Tim. That was funny.
No, we didn't get erasers.
What's your water control strategy?
Tim's the only one with a handkerchief in his back pocket because he's much more.
The only one with a
Looks like these
magnetic
shirts
watch
look great,
band.
guys. Don't worry.
Oh, there you go.
And they're black, so we should be fine. Good job, True Work, on your well-built shirts. Thank you.
All right, water control strategy. Oh, squeaking. Quicker writing. Fine.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Okay, Tim, you want to kick us off again?
Hang on a second.
Or whoever's first could just start going, actually.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the house was very much high exposure from a roofing standpoint and exterior wall standpoint, which you'll see some pictures here.
We can get into a little bit more detail
Yeah.
here in a sec.
But effectively, what was required is a robust roofing membrane, good flashing around parapets, and using polyguards, what they call now UV 240, which used to be called Alumaflash, as the WRB.
Yeah, that's some bomber stuff right there.
Yep.
And I'd also like to note that's probably one of our more expensive strategies, right? So we got a steakhouse budget, we got a very high exposure house. That's a perfect strategy. On my Reisinger build, we did a zip. I kind of think of that as maybe $ plus in terms of budget. We spent a lot of time air sealing between the foundation and the framing. I use that Steve Basic detail you've seen before. We use some Prosco joint and seam. We like the belt and suspenders approach, especially at the bottom of the house. All the remodelers in the room will tell you that most of the rot you find in the bottom 2 feet of the house. So we really want to take that bottom 2 feet very seriously. Hardly ever do we find rot in the middle of a wall on the second floor with the roof overhang above it.
Yeah, and so for me, I also went with the zip system. It's something that we're familiar with, that my framers know how to do. My house is elevated, so we had to use scaffolding, and that's one trip around the house, which also makes it less expensive. Yeah. You can see in the picture there, it was a true chainsaw retrofit, so I cut the eaves off of the house, and which is a great thing to do when you're using zip, because you can have that continuous layer from roof all the way down the walls. And then, what else did I say? Oh yeah, so even though it is the monopoly framing, I knew that I wanted to protect against water, so I'm putting overhangs on the house. And then, in addition to that, I've got a robust rain screen system, so between my cladding and what's behind it, I've got actually almost 1.5 inch gap.
Yeah, it's really nice. Extremely robust.
And then we've got just a few more detailed pictures of Tim's project here to show you his system.
Well, you can see the plywood sheathing in the first picture before any weather barrier was installed. A lot of exposure. Even, I think Matt made the comment one time that during the construction of this house, we had more rain than any other project we'd ever done.
It was
Probably
absolutely
rained
ridiculous
15
that year.
inches
Wow.
during this, maybe more during this project.
Yeah, when they say annual rainfall, that's an average, not the actual what you're totally going to get.
Yeah.
And we probably got double that year.
Yeah, and you see the Alumaflash shingled, and you see the roof with the whip underneath it, and we went over that with a 40 mil TPO. You can begin to see some of the penetrations. Since we couldn't go exterior on the walls with the venting, we had to create these little stack chases that we could run all the vents up through a flat roof, which is a very hard waterproofing detail to pull off. And of course, we followed up with all the blue barrier products that are compatible with the Alumaflash UV 240.
Yeah, and as a side note, since we're talking about this process of developing standards, for years we used TPO, we'd use a 40 or a 60 mil, and then when we found a roofer that introduced us to PVC roofing and realized he was really good at it and talked about the benefits, it was a percentage more, but we felt like it was a better, longer lasting product. We've now gone to PVC for most of our jobs,
That's right.
correct?
That's right.
And for a couple of jobs, we've even gone to the next step, which is probably the most bomber, which is a Kemper roof system. That they use on plaza decks in New York City. And that one really jumps up the cost, but boy, is it a bomber system. So even with a steakhouse budget, there's a ultra steakhouse budget sometimes too that you have to decide whether you're going to go to or not.
Right.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right.
Depends on the thickness. I think the thicker it is, the longer the warranty is that night.
Yeah.
All right, next question. What's your insulation strategy?
Ooh.
Bonus points for pictures. I noticed that Daniel had a drawing on his first one.
That was pretty impressive.
I can draw, but not that fast.
I can't draw to say. I can barely do stick figures. How many of you, out of curiosity, went on the homes tour on the VIP pass? Okay, quite a few of you
wow.
saw the Reisinger build. Anybody going on the Saturday tour? Show of hands. Okay, so some of you will see this house in person. We stopped construction at the insulation stage, so you get to see this in particular that we're talking about right now in person, which is kind of cool.
If you're ready, we can start with you.
Yeah. Underneath the whip on the roof, we put 2 inches of rigid polyiso. And on the roof deck and the walls inside, we just use open cell foam.
Simple.
On the Reisinger build, we had in the roof line closed cell SPF. We've kind of moved towards using closed cell because of the benefit of some structural benefit, but also you don't have to worry about the vapor barrier issue, right? If you do open cell, there is some concern in a hot, humid climate that you might have some vapor drive and some ability for moisture to move through that open cell into a roof deck. So we like the reduced risk of closed cell foam.
Matt, I've also moved on to your more detailed slide if you want to reference any of those.
Oh, sweet, okay. And then we did on the walls on that project a blown-in blanket insulation. And then we have Zip R sheathing on most of the house. What is that center photo? I can't see it.
Zip R.
Oh, it's Zip R,
Yeah.
gotcha. So that's Zip R that we did R6 on most of the house, which is a great choice if you're in the South. I love Zip R. I'm not a huge fan of going to the R9 or the R12. I think the weird size nail that you need and the kind of odd nail gun makes it a little bit harder of a detail. But then on one wall of the house, which tour goers saw or future tour goers will get to see, we used R20 exterior insulation, 2 layers of 1.5-inch Atlas. And if you're in the north, this is totally the way to go. I mean, it's a huge blanket of insulation on the outside of your building, outsolation rather than insulation. So we did that on one wall on the back of the house, and that's all open for y'all to see. No, in the roof line, we did 4 inches of closed cell. And then on top of the roof on that particular house, I forgot to mention, we also have R22 in the rooftop. So it's an R50 roof in combined total.
Okay, yeah, so on my house, I used all Rockwell products. You can see in the picture there, so I did the Monopoly framing so that I had continuous exterior insulation, and so on the walls, we did the 2-inch, which is an R8, and then on top of the roof deck, we did 3-inch, which is an R12. And then because we were working with an existing, my walls are only 2x4s, so the cavity insulation there is also the Rockwell bats. And so that gives me an R15 in the walls, but with the combined with the outside, it's R23, but effective it's higher because I have the exterior insulation. And then under the roof deck, I used the R38 bats. And then in my floor, since my house is elevated, I have to insulate all the way around. And so that continuous insulation goes down the wall across the bottom of the house as well. So in my floor joists, between my floor joists, I have the R38 and then another layer. So then that gets zipped as well. And then my outermost layer then is another 3 inches of Rockwell.
It's awesome.
Nice. Okay, our next category is going to be HVAC. Oh, no.
Go back.
That's our out point, by the
Yeah,
way.
write your answers and I'll save myself a
Are we
click.
supposed to be done at noon?
Go back.
12:15,
15.
Okay,
We're
perfect.
good. Sorry.
quick. We've got
problem.
time.
Okay, so this is HVAC. Gotcha.
Or you want to just talk through?
Yeah, maybe we should talk through this one.
You guys are
Gotta be
not the
quick.
fastest riders.
Gonna do a drawing.
Do a drawing, do a drawing.
Do your drawing
If you're
while
gonna do a
Tim
drawing,
runs
go
on.
ahead.
Go ahead, Tim, you go first.
Okay. So in this, and we like to always use rigid ductwork. We always insist on dehumidification, love to have ERVs, and love to have VRF ducted systems when we can.
And I pretty much did the same thing on that middle build, which, by the way, you can crawl into those attics and look at them.
I'll be up there. if you want to
Daniel was
visit me.
stationed, we joked at the office, he was our attic troll. Poor guy had to be stationed in a hot attic all day
Actually,
the other day.
last night at the BS and Beer event, I walked in and a lady goes, "It's the attic troll."
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nice.
Let's make sure that does not stick.
No, that's his name.
We don't want that to slick. So up there in the attic, Daniel was showing people we have a less cost ERV. We use Life Breath. One cool thing about that I'd like to mention, Daniel, is we did a pre-filter on that, which you can see, and it makes me much more comfortable using a lower cost ERV. You know, the Zender at my house has incredible filtration, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted it, because they have really high filtration and really good filters, whereas some of the cheaper units have those crappy filters that you like wash under your sink and put back in, right? Well, those are okay if you have a pre-filter. And so we did a pre-filter on this job, which is a big cabinet with an Aprilaire filter, like a pleated media filter, and a MERV 10, let's call it.
Yeah.
And when I retrofitted that at my house and when we did it at the Reisinger build, that's gonna catch all the major junk out of the air, including bugs that get sucked in, and stop it at that filter. So the filter that's at the ERV at my house now stays very, very clean, and I don't have to spend a bunch of money on expensive filters, frankly, too, which has been kind of nice. So we have dedicated dehumidification for each level of the house. We have we have HVAC equipment for each level of the house, and we've got a small and fairly inexpensive ERV for each level of the house.
Yeah, and I think kind of across all of these, we have very similar, the components are similar in all the builds that we do.
Yep.
But I think it is worth mentioning something that we do as well, which I did on my house, is have an engineer, a mechanical engineer, design the system, right? We don't just either rely on the subcontractor or make it up ourselves. We employ mechanical engineers to size the machines, to do the duct layouts so we know where they go. So I did that on my house. I didn't use any rigid duct as a cost savings. However, we were able to lay everything out so that we had straight runs. So we're using flex, but we're stretching it and it goes straight. So that kind of minimizes the bad parts of that.
That's right. I forgot to mention we used Readuct at the Reisinger build.
That's right. Yeah.
Which was a way less costly ducting system. And it's not as good as rigid for sure, but for the budget point, I really like the high performance aspects for that ducting
And
system.
it really works well when you have tight spaces you have to get through that
Boy, did it
rigid
ever.
will not get through.
That's
All
right.
right, we've got to keep going. We're
Okay,
gonna
but
not
just,
get-
Sorry,
just
okay.
really quick, because the second part of that question was indoor air quality.
Yes.
And so to that, a couple of components that, at least on my house, I electrified my home. So we have no gas appliances in the house at all. But in addition to that, because we build super airtight homes, that we have makeup air systems, which we have in pretty much all the builds that we do. So when you're sucking air out of your house from your range vent or whatever, you're also introducing
Pushing air back in.
balance that pressure.
Great. Okay, we're going to go through an aesthetic detail that was difficult, and Tim's going to kick us off with, I'm going to go straight to his detailed pictures.
As you've seen in some of the photos that we've shown, this particular house we did, the gallery house, as I said, has lots of glass in it. And the interesting architectural feature is the glass, much of it is embedded in the walls, in the stonework, in the concrete work. And so very difficult to install, very difficult to service, and very difficult to manage any condensation that might happen because these custom-made steel frames are not thermally broken. That was an architectural requirement. So you see the windowsill detail that we did there to try to make something that would manage any condensation droplets that hit it, and then the way we finish to it, so it looks like the glass is actually embedded in the drywall and in the stonework.
Awesome. Matt, I have the skylight in for the Risinger build.
Yeah, which is funny that you're cueing me on that, because Chelsea said we need a big skylight.
I was like the pain. I was the one that caused that pain.
Penetration, no skylights.
Beauty.
I pushed back on it, and I was totally wrong. If you go out to that job site, that skylight is amazing. The center of the house would have been really dark, and this was this like big 2-story area of a stairwell, and by putting that big skylight in, wow, that has been a really total game changer for that house. Now, on the other hand, we made sure that we did a big curb for it. So when we put our shingle roof down, we had a real big metal curb, good flashing from Mundo, our roofer. And it will be a little bit of a pain when we get to the detail phase, though, to drywall that, because we're going to have to build some scaffolding, but I think it's worth it. That was one detail that we were like, okay, I think we're going to spend a few bucks on this, and it's going to have a lot of punch, and I think it does. Yeah. It's a Facro window, is the skylight.
And we've got 2 in the
Skylight
garage,
window.
same.
What was the vent out of the side of that skylight? I didn't understand.
That was a dehumidifier return. So that was sucking air out of that. We were trying to get to the hottest and highest space of the house, and that skylight shaft would be hot, and humidity tends to rise in the house. It's more humid in the hotter air. So we had a return for our dehumidifier out of that space into the dehumidifier, and then we supplied our dehumidified air into the 2 bathrooms upstairs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Daniel?
Then, so for my house, because I did the monopoly framing, but I still wanted overhangs, one that's kind of a tricky detail to begin with, but the aesthetic that I was really going for was an exposed rafter tail. So I had to develop a system where and I wanted it to be robust and durable and last forever, so I actually made them out of steel. And so I had to create essentially a tag-on rafter tail that attaches to the top of the roof and sticks out over. And working that out and getting it to look nice and function with and not create any thermal bridging was tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay, our last question is to describe a unique challenge that you had to solve. Come on. 1 second, sorry. Clicked it about 10 times. There we go. Okay. And these are all very different. I think, Tim, we had talked about misaligned priorities.
Little philosophical, but in that particular project, the design team and the owner and us had a difficult time aligning our performance goals. And we really had to push hard and to maintain our position so that house, which was probably more vulnerable than most, could survive whatever elements it was subjected to. And ultimately, the client really pushed back hard from a budget standpoint during the job. But as Matt has said about these people, they are now our biggest fans.
Yeah, they are. We often joke in the office that sometimes during construction is similar to being pregnant. I've got 4 kids, and I remember the stages quite well. There's times when you're really happy to be pregnant, and there's other times when it's 110 out, and my wife's 9 months pregnant, is not real happy about this pregnancy. And so, construction goes in waves, but after the baby's here, a year later, you're so happy that you might do it again, and you forget about all that, right? And I told, more than once, Tim and I were telling the team, hey, don't forget, we're pregnant, it's hot out, things are unhappy, but when the baby gets here, they're gonna love us. And sure enough, these clients, even though a couple of times they crushed us at meetings, they're super happy, the house is super well built. And I think that also goes back to that setting proper expectations. We set a proper expectation. One particular one that I remember was, remember the paint bid, or the paint price? He was like, no way, that's way too much money for paint. That's crazy. And we're like, no, this is how much it costs to paint this house. This is a detailed house. I don't care that you've repainted your house. You can't put whatever you think it costs for a paint job on your mind on this budget. And we didn't budge on it. And sure enough, we were obviously right. And the client has been super happy, right? So we need to be the experts, and we need to drive the bus.
yeah.
Matt, do you want to speak a little bit to the over roof on the?
Yeah, we did a over roof detail, which, by the way, you can see. Bring your flashlights to the job site on Saturday so you can look up on the open soffit. But we were trying to build this house on a budget, but also build it to a really high performance. So I mentioned we use trusses. That's a BFS truss, roof truss package. We did storage trusses up there. But being able to monopoly frame it and do an over roof, we wanted to say, okay, at my house, I did kind of a tricky detail with the tails. How can we do it a little less expensively? And Tim came up with the idea of putting a 2x4 on the flat over top of our over roof. On top, so basically we have a monopoly framed house with zip. The zip sheathing on the wall touches the zip roof sheathing. Then we added a couple layers of insulation on top of the roof. So then to form the overhang, we put a 2x4 on the flat. And so that 2x4 on the flat runs 2 feet out as the overhang and then runs all the way up to the ridge, and it formed a ventilation cavity on top of the over roof. Then we laid another layer of zip, just half-inch zip system sheathing. And at that point, we're like, okay, I'm comfortable with going down on the roofing. Normally we like metal roofs, we like tile roofs or longer lasting roofs. We said, okay, well, if we've got this vented over roof, I'm comfortable with doing a shingle on this because we really needed to bring the budget down. So we did a standard Atlas, high impact shingle. And I think it turned out great from both an aesthetic. You can't tell it's any different than my house where I did a much trickier detail, but we also have this extra forgiveness of a ventilation cavity.
Yeah, that's great. And so for me, the biggest challenge or most unique thing about my project was that I chose to live in the house. Well, I shouldn't say that I chose. Setting expectations, it was a family decision that we made.
I was going to say, maybe your family didn't choose.
But it was a budget choice, right? It was if we have to move out and rent somewhere for what is now 2 years, that would have been a tremendous amount of money, and we decided let's not spend that money by moving out and instead put it into the house by maybe getting a swimming pool or something like that. Now it was or has been pretty challenging and kind of like the ups and downs. Sometimes it's worse than others.
You're still married.
But we're still married, yeah. But like I said before, we don't allow our clients to do that because it's not for the faint of heart.
We always joke that it's like living in jail. The jail keeper tells you what time to get up and what time to go to bed and when it's going to be quiet. You don't get to decide.
Yeah. So just a summary of what we've gone through. We really think it's important that you identify what your priorities are for building and what specific enemies that you're addressing in your climate or with your particular design, and consider the context before you implement something. And I think the main takeaway for our process is that communication is key. And I think, Matt, if you want to close us.
Yeah, a little coming soon here for y'all. You're the first to ever hear this. We've never talked about this publicly, but we really feel like there is a building standard that is missing on the market. We like Passive House. We've done Austin Energy Green Building, but we feel like there's a standard that's beyond code that's kind of missing in the marketplace for builders like you and I that we're working on. We've spent quite a bit of time already. We're going to call it the Build HD standard. We're going to announce it in 2025 at some point. And I've even thought recently that we should also incorporate production builders and have a standard that would be a minimum standard for production builders. But we're going to have 3 levels, 3 tiers, like here's a minimum standard, here's a better standard, and here's the highest tier. So we're working on that. A lot of you have seen our Build Show Network videos, have seen a lot of our contributors' work. We're going to kind of incorporate all of that into a Build HD standard. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, go take a picture of my truck on the show floor with our Build HD license plate. That's where that comes from. And Tim and I on our Chevy 2500s got rid of the 2500 and said Build HD instead of 2500 HD. So this is coming soon. You get to hear about it now. And lastly, do me a favor, anyone who's got their phone who's on Instagram, take a picture of us on stage and tag us at our company, which is Reisinger Build _ATX. Throw that up there, we'll reshare it. We really appreciate you guys coming, hanging out with us today, talking about our standards. I would encourage you to make your own standards and stick with them and figure out what your minimum is in all these defensive strategies. Don't let your clients dictate that. You are the experts. You need to dictate how you build a house. And the last piece of advice that I think has really taken our company to where we are today is build every house just a little better than the last house. Whether it's one detail, whether it's air sealing, whether it's incorporating a fresh air system that's the right one for this particular project, but make every project just a little bit better than your last project, and that will continue to elevate you in the industry. So thank you guys for coming. Appreciate your support, and we'll see you out there on Build Show Live.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.